Okay, so this is our overall agenda. We'll do some introductions. So I'll introduce myself in a moment. Then we'll have a couple of slides about IGeLU highlights and themes. We'll do a bit of a round robin for most of the session, where we'll cover individual products listed there, and then some things that we've taken away from the conference individually back to our own institutions. We'll provide some links to conference materials so you can look it up yourself, and we'll hopefully have time for a Q&A. So my name is Stacey van Groll, and I've been at UQ for 12 years now, but the last 2 of them I've been Discovery and Access Coordinator. This is a pretty new role, which was created as part of our implementation of Alma Primo last year. We went live in June last year. And then I managed the transition to the new Primo UI in June this year. Primarily, I'm responsible for Alma config and the Primo back office. And I really have a strong user-driven focus, so what the users want and optimizing the user experience based on evidence-based practice. So I touch a lot on Alma and Primo analytics as well. Kendall?
Hi, my name's Kendall Kousek, and I have been a Discovery Services and Systems Librarian at Macquarie University for over 3 years. My main responsibilities are usually related to the configuration of acquisitions and resource management in Alma, focusing on e-resource management in Alma and the PCI, but I'm currently working on a Leganto pilot project. My aim at IGeLU was to learn as much as I could from the experiences of other institutions who have implemented Leganto. Amelia?
Hi, my name is Amelia Rowe, and I've been the Applications Librarian at RMIT for the past 2 years. Generally, that role entails administration in Alma, predominantly in the acquisitions and resource management area. And I also do a lot of our administration and configuration for our Primo instance, which also included the implementation of the Primo new UI at the start of this year.
So, Kendall?
For those of you not familiar with IGeLU, it's the international group of Ex Libris users, and they host an annual conference, generally in Europe. In 2017, the conference was located in St. Petersburg, Russia, and throughout our presentation, you will note photos that we took during our explorations of the city. The conference was a great opportunity to hear from institutions from around the world and learn what they are doing with their Ex Libris products. Tweets from the conference can be found using the hashtag IGeLU2017. Next slide. One of the recurring messages from Ex Libris throughout the conference was the importance of the community's engagement with the content section of the Ideas Exchange. Ex Libris were very keen to promote the Content Ideas Exchange, which is a great improvement in giving the community a more visible platform for making known what resources they would like. Hopefully, you're all aware that you are able to create an account in the Ideas Exchange and suggest and vote for ideas. All you need is an institutional email address to sign up. You have 20 votes per product that you can assign to ideas. You can assign a maximum of 3 votes per idea, and you get your votes given back to you once an idea is implemented or declined. Submitting a content idea covers the range of Ex Libris knowledge bases or discovery products, and if you submit an idea for the discovery systems, there's no need to resubmit that idea for the knowledge bases. The idea submission covers both. Your idea need not be limited to requesting new content. It can also be a request for authority files or enrichments of existing community's own records. There are plans for a content section in the Knowledge Centre to be introduced in 2018, and there will be future NERS votings for the knowledge bases and indexes. Next slide, please. Here is a short list of some useful websites that were mentioned during the conference. So there's the developers network, both the product forum and the tech blog, and also GitHub for the Primo development of the new UI. Next slide, Amelia.
We put in a slide specifically on algorithmic literacy because this was the topic of the keynote speaker. So I just wanted to run through a few of the things that keynote speaker, which was Corey Harper, who is a data scientist and technology researcher with Elsevier Labs, and what he shared with us about algorithmic literacy. What he focused on was the fact that AI, so artificial intelligence, that is behind a lot of the machine learning and algorithms that exist today, is usually taught what it knows, and it's taught in two different ways. Supervised, which is using known quantities or labeled data to train a system, and unsupervised learning, which is unlabeled data to generate inferred results. And this learning is done via data training, which usually uses pattern recognition or big data, so giving the machine lots and lots of examples to work off of. We then moved on to talk about what machine learning in the library environment is and what it means. So we can think of things like relevancy ranking, and you can start to think about, well, how many people actually understand what's going on with our relevancy ranking algorithms, and that maybe there's an importance there in really having a bit of algorithmic literacy in order to understand what is going on with those algorithms and how they might be changing and learning over time. I spoke a little bit about things like recommender systems, machine-assisted classification, and knowledge graph development, such as entity relationships and open information extractions as other areas within the library that machine learning is starting to come in and do more. And then we moved on to actually talk about the role of librarians with algorithmic literacy. So I wanted us to think about the things that we do, so the things that librarians are currently doing, such as data aggregation, collection, curation, search, normalization, identifier management, format standardization, and I think the list does go on. And they all lend themselves, so all these things that we already do lend themselves to machine learning. And it said that with these knowledge and these skills, that librarians can actually really help with curation of data. And because machine learning is based on big data and data sets, librarians who are already good at curation and at data curation could actually really leverage this knowledge in the machine learning area. We can also help with the curation of learning models, so to help structure machine learning and to best test the accuracy or correctness of a system's outcomes. And also he also said that librarians were in a good position to help access the tools used for machine learning, because libraries tend to be very innovative technologically speaking. So we do tend to have access to some of the technologies that are used for machine learning. And after establishing what algorithmic literacy is, what machine learning is, and where it exists within libraries, we then moved on to talk about the risk of learned bias. And it's the notion that an AI that is created based upon a specific data set or with specific patterns in mind might have a bias towards that particular style of data. So a good example is social use in social settings, that it gives a social bias because the test data set was predominantly heavy of a particular minority group or something like that, or because the data lacked information about minority groups. Those minority groups won't be considered in the end result or properly represented or delivered to by the machine AI system. And so we spoke about the need to be aware of how this learned bias can come into play in machine learning, and that librarians were in a really good position to help with this identification of the learned bias because we're really good at evaluating information quality. We're also really good at documenting and cataloguing resources, so ensuring that there is the correct labelling on resources so that the machine learning learns appropriately. We're also very good at documenting provenance, and that can be really useful in machine learning to make sure that the machine is actually following the right conclusions. And also standardization. Anything with machines, I think, is extremely good with standardization. And sort of my own sort of personal takeaway from the keynote on algorithmic literacy was there was actually a real correlation between some of the things that were being said about algorithmic literacy and a lot of conversations that go on in the library environment about information literacy, and made me think, how much do students understand why those top 10 results are being delivered to them and how those results may or may not be relevant to them depending on the area of study, the background that they're coming from, such as they're being in Australia, and the algorithms that are developed for something like Primo are based on data sets that are international. So whether or not that's having an impact on the results that they're seeing, and that maybe understanding the learned biases in the system will help us develop better search strategies to actually find the information that is relevant to us. We can probably move on to the next slide now. So after talking about the keynote, I wanted to just briefly talk a little bit about interoperability. This is another topic that isn't product specific, and there was the interoperability product working group gave a report back at the IGeLU conference on the things that they've been doing, and I just wanted to share some of those with you. So they've been doing a lot of work in trying to raise people's awareness of APIs and also of how you can use them. They've worked on things like the Developers Day, hosted hackathons, and various group coding events. And then they spoke a little bit about the upcoming interoperability functionality, the work that they've been doing a little bit in Primo VE, but I guess maybe the Primo product working group has a bit more to say on that one, so I won't touch on that. They spoke about the authentication focus group that they've got going. I think this is probably a big topic for a lot of people in the Elmer world, with the idea that ex libris might be moving away from internal logins and moving towards things like the social login and the external login in Elmer. And while we haven't heard a lot back yet from the authentication focus group, they are working with ex libris to make sure that whatever solution is implemented is one that is good for the whole community. So if you've got, I guess, anything to say on that authentication issue, they're a good group to contact in order to make sure that the needs in that are being heard. They spoke about the customization framework. So that's the Primo New UI back office and the way that it has its customization manager. And obviously there's been a lot done in terms of getting people to share their customizations and share those packages predominantly on GitHub. So they spoke a bit about that and encouraging people to actually share those customizations so that we can all benefit. They also shared with us the API roadmap, and I haven't put it in any of the slides because I'm sure you can go find it yourself, but I found it really interesting to see some of the APIs that are coming. And just as a little add-on, the Content Special Interest Group was also presenting at the same time as the interoperability one. And I just wanted to make a bit of a note for people that the Content Special Interest Group is kind of a new group that's come about, and it's a combination of the KBAB, which is a knowledge-based working group, and the Community Zone working group. And while putting these slides together, Stacey, Kendall, and I sort of wondered, where can we find this information about all these product working groups and these special interest groups that are around? So I actually had a bit of a look, and if you go to the IGeLU website, there is a tab called Product Working Groups, and you can click that to have a look at any of the product working groups. And there is also another tab called Special Interest Groups, and you can use that to find things like the information about the Content Special Interest Group. So if you've got any interest in any of those working groups or the special interest groups or their updates, that's a good place to go to find that information. Next slide.
Okay, we felt the need to include this, even though we don't have a lot of detail about it yet, because it was a new product that was officially launched at IGeLU that was discussed in several sessions. It's called Exploro, which is means research in Spanish, and basically it's a research management tool. Conceptually, it was described as being all about supporting researchers in their main research drivers around collaboration, competition, reputation, prestige, compliance, all the big buzzword strategy level stuff. They're at the stage of working with 5 development partners, and they're also, of course, consulting with librarians and researchers. And just overall, it was envisioned as supporting researchers in the research process and the drivers and goals for them in their research cycle, which is really published heavy, and being really focused on what they need rather than librarians telling researchers what we think they need. So that's the overall conference, non-product specific things. So we'll go on to our individual specific product areas. So Amelia?
Thank you, Stacey. So I've split what I'm going to talk to about ALMA into a few different dot points that you can see on the slide there. I want to start with a few comments about ALMA Digital. There was only a couple of presentations overall on ALMA Digital, so it didn't have a lot of focus, but I think there were a lot of conversations about it. People are either only just starting to use it or trying to figure out if they want to use it or not. So for those of you that might not know ALMA Digital very well, it's a fairly new part of ALMA. And it's designed, obviously sitting in ALMA, so that you can manage your print, your electronic and your digital material all within the one system, being ALMA. ALMA Digital uses AWS storage, that's Amazon storage. And they also went on to, in the product update from Ex Libris, they spoke about things that are coming. So an EAD import, which is to enable the bulk import of collections from your old system. Speaking from RMIT's experience, where we've had to sort of manually be loading all of our old collections, I think people that are newly going to ALMA Digital would actually be quite pleased with something like that. We didn't have it when we moved to ALMA Digital, and it certainly took us quite a long time to move those collections in. So hearing about the bulk import was quite good. And they also spoke a bit about the analytics support that's been added. So there's an analytics area within the ALMA Analytics, specifically for the digital materials. So it gives you things like the usage and stuff like that. And I think there is more to come in future releases. There's also talking in terms of what's coming for ALMA Digital, improved support for Dublin Core records. This is supposed to include things like normalization rules for Dublin Core records, which we currently don't have, and also a bit more flexibility in how you can use Dublin Core, such as things like fields that are viewable in the viewer support. And I will jump to talk a little bit about ALMA viewers, which are the way that digital records are displayed in ALMA, or from within ALMA. And they were actually got a fair amount of conversations going, because people are quite curious about what there are in terms of options for the display of digital material. Out of the box, there is an ALMA viewer, which doesn't work for a lot of resource types. So just before the IGeLU conference, there was, I think it was the August release, introduced what was known as the, what is called in the ALMA back office, the Universal Viewer, which is an IFFF viewer. So it supports things like TIFF files, very large image files. a lot of people are interested in how that works and how good it works. I can say since the conference, RMIT have been playing with that viewer. For us, the biggest drawback is that that viewer doesn't work for restricted resources, and a lot of our resources require login before you can view them, which means even using the universal viewer, a user needs to download the item before they can actually view it properly. So for us, that's a bit of a drawback on that particular viewer. And they also spoke a little bit about custom viewers. And I think there is a blog post on the Ex Libris developers blog about custom viewers, and in particular about the introduction of a book custom viewer. RMIT doesn't have any experience with custom viewers, so I can't really say very much more on them. But I would like to put a little bit of a call out while I can to, and if there's anyone out there in the community that is using custom viewers, I'd love to hear from you, because it's something that at RMIT we're starting to scope what we want from a viewer, and we think we'll need to go to custom viewers to get it. So I'd love to hear if anyone's actually implemented a custom viewer in ALMA yet. Other things that were mentioned about ALMA D, there was a presentation on the Developers Day about using the SWORD protocol to be able to email digital deposits. It was quite an interesting presentation, but probably very tech-heavy to implement. The next stop point on my slides for ALMA is community zone record quality. This wasn't something that was any particular presentation. It sort of got covered within the Ex Libris question and answer panel. And there was comments about the questions about the quality of community zone records, or the poor quality of community zone records, and what is Ex Libris doing or going to do to improve those. They spoke about using, Ex Libris spoke about using Ulrich's data to enable an open access and peer-reviewed indicators on community zone bib records. And I had notes that this came from matches in the ISSN information. And there was also conversations around community zone records and how Ex Libris is going to be improving those, and the steps that they are planning to take to do that. So their first approach is apparently to approach vendors and ask the vendors for full bib records. This requires certain level agreements with the vendors and can be quite time consuming for Ex Libris, and sometimes they don't always get those agreements. Their second step is to identify customers with good bibliographic records and to ask those to contribute them to the community zone. The third track that is used, or that Ex Libris are considering using, is actually to approach national libraries and ask them to be able to access the National Library's bibliographic data in order to ingest those good quality records into the community zone. In addition, Ex Libris mentioned that they're investigating whether they'll be able to use something like the 360 Mark service, which is a Serial Solutions ProQuest product, in helping improve that metadata as well. I quickly put in a point on the ALMA slide about the ALMA Open Test Framework, which was something mentioned in the ALMA product update as coming in 2018. There are a couple of universities within, I think, the Australia and New Zealand region that are using that as a, that are, I think, early adopters or testers for that, and can probably say more about it. But it looked like an interesting way of getting the community working together in terms of sharing what testing they are doing with each ALMA release. It in no way reduces the need for individual institutions to do the testing, but it could be a really good way of flagging when people find problems without having to necessarily turn to things like the ALMA list. We could actually see it all from the documentation. A big drawback from that so far from people that I've spoken to that are in that testing group is that it still requires that manual testing by each institution, and we're not sure if it's actually going to save us any time. So that's something that I'm personally keeping my eye out for in 2018. And the next note I've got there is on the ALMA Q&A. So I've already mentioned the community zone record quality, which was discussed in the ALMA Q&A, but there were a few other points that were worth mentioning. Industry standards such as linked data and BibFrame, which Ex Libris are moving towards and which we're starting to see more in more product releases. Benchmark analytics. There will also be a API website being launched, and this will give us the ability to look at API call tallies, including users, bibs, etc. And it'll also be by region, such as the APAC region, and it'll be a part of the developer network, and obviously the data will be anonymized. So it's a way of getting a bit of an idea of how much API usage is going on. And I've got a couple of notes from Stacey here about the ALMA panel, so thank you, Stacey, because I was actually on the panel and was too busy talking to take notes during it. So Stacey's notes are that the overall impression was that the transition to new systems is never easy, and we quickly forget the bad things that were in the prior systems. And we often forget to focus on the things in the new system, such as the ALMA, that are working for us. And that many of the people on the panel mentioned using a lot of the core systems in ALMA currently, but a lot haven't started looking at the more extended stuff, such as linked open data and DDA, because of the time needed to learn and to get up and running with ALMA. It was also mentioned that a lot of people have, I guess, long tails after data migration, and the need for data cleanup continues for quite a while after implementation. And that there is a strong focus on supporting library staff outside of tech services and systems, and that sometimes there's difficulty in explaining the nature of our systems work to management and configuration, including system limits. Onto my next point is the ALMA new UI. I quickly put that dot point in because the ALMA new UI was mentioned a few times and discussed. Obviously, we're all live now with ALMA new UI, either in our sandbox or our production environments, I imagine, so I don't need to say very much about that. But I would like to share with you a brief overview that Ex Libris gave on timeframes. So obviously, we all know now that January release is when everyone has to be live with the new UI. And Ex Libris shared that for the first half of 2018, they're going to be focusing on enhancements to the functionality that they've put in the new UI. And I've made my own note, aka bug fixes. So I think we can expect a lot of bug fixes coming in the first half of 2018 for the new UI. And then they mentioned that the second half of 2018, they will be looking at new workflows and enhancements. So we can expect them to maybe look at some of the areas in the new UI that weren't explored as thoroughly in the initial release, and we'll start seeing some changes in those areas as well. And I made a quick dot point there about the ALMA nurse enhancements for 2017 were shared with everyone, so the winners of those enhancements. But I'm sure we've all seen the emails and can go look it up on the list and whatnot, so I won't actually mention those now. Next slide.
Okay, so I'll cover a little bit about Primo in terms of content. So I've got a slide each about content management, content discovery, and content display. So in terms of content management, there's an ongoing focus, of course, on expanding collection coverage and metadata. As we know, Ex Libris, they had a big merger about 2 years ago, so Summon and Primo are coming together. It's now one team and one ingestion process, but they're still separate indexes, and that will remain the case. And just noting that the majority of the work is now done, and they're on to the little content gaps, the long tail, basically. In terms of communication, we're hoping, or they advise, that there would be more communication and transparency about the PCI collection schedule, just like there is for the ALMA CZ updates. In terms of big data, which was a big theme of the conference, of course, and Amelia's mentioned some of this already about ways that Ex Libris is working to better improve records and data and how promptly they're loaded into the system, and noted as well that we can help with that process by contributions to the CZ and also by telling them what is important to us via the ideas exchange so that they can prioritise their work because they have workloads just like we all do. And there was also talk about improving multimedia content, which doesn't have as good metadata traditionally, and identifiers. And of course, talk about the ongoing known issues with this sort of data, like title level content coming through from PCI, which doesn't deed up and further with our local data. And, you know, the known official word that EBSCO is still not playing nice with their metadata. So encouraging people to use the alternate coverage lists for the PCI to make sure that they get as much content coming through from other collections. In terms of discovery, big focus on open access, which is great because we know that that's an important thing. It certainly is for UQ as a big focus. So we're seeing a lot of PCI citations already that have been tagged, and we'll have the ability to tag our local records to blend in. And there's also going to be an open access indicator, potentially top level facet coming to Primo, which is already in Summon. ORCID IDs, which is great for that research support. Continuing work on search and ranking with all those details mentioned there. And I was particularly interested in the contextual relationships, where if you open a book record, for example, then you would see details of chapter records within that, which I think would be a great improvement. I'm also eagerly awaiting the exposure of library records to Google crawling, because that's just another way into our library content, and similarly with exposure of our institutional repository records. That's great. There was a broad level idea of Topic Explorer, which is still in the research lab, so we don't have a huge amount of detail. It's not on the roadmap yet, for example, but it's basically Ex Libris exploring what users are trying to do in the context of why they're wanting to do it, and helping them to discover and explore and send researchers down trails of discovery, basically. And then I just wanted to mention the thing that we already have, which is awesome, already here in March 2017, was the change to further preferred records to enhance that preferred record with all of the other citations and the metadata from other PCI collections, which I think was an awesome improvement. In terms of display, a little bit that's not so content related, but potentially of interest. Most people are happily using the new UI, but we do recognise, it is recognised that there are some people with some issues, and Ex Libris just encouraged everyone with issues to put in cases, basically, because it's difficult for them to troubleshoot, of course, if you just say something like it's slow with nothing to back that up. So they definitely encouraged cases to be submitted. The official word that there'd be no more development of the classic UI after the end of 2017, but still supported, of course, and that it wouldn't be in the NERS enhancement process anymore. Also that NERS would be streamlined with just one round rather than 2 rounds of voting. And Amelia's touched a little bit already on Primo VE, but just wanting to mention that it is definitely not considered to be, by Ex Libris, to be Primo Lite, because they're aiming for back office parity next year and welcoming people to move towards the end of next year. Kendall?
I'm going to discuss Leganto. It's not very content specific, more Leganto specific. So Leganto is still a young product, so there were a large number of enhancements in 2017, with many of them coming from customer requests. Ex Libris also solved 200 customer-related bugs. There is NERS for Leganto that is coming. The process will initially begin with a prioritization exercise, and then move to the complete process once there are 50 customers live with Leganto. As of IGeLU, there are about 54 institutions that had signed up to Leganto, with 23 of these customers live. So institutions are also encouraged to use the Ideas Exchange to register their Leganto ideas. IGeLU presented on their roadmap, which included ideas such as further integrations with ALMA workflows, including interlibrary loan requests to be initiated from the citations, enhanced purchase request capabilities, and enhanced branding. It will also have a broken link checker, and they will enhance the recommendations from the libraries to instructors functionality. The reading list task list will be redesigned to be a reading list dashboard and will have the ability to create personalised views. This is expected in the second half of 2018. They will improve the mobile support over the next 6 months and have a proof of concept for a native mobile Campus M solution. Ex-Libris also see Leganto as having potential value beyond just managing reading lists. Over the next 6 to 12 months, they are investigating how they can predict students at risk and provide student success indicators. Ex-Libris will keep information on user actions, but will anonymise this data. They will use data mining and machine learning algorithms to get insight into this data, and they will create prediction models to identify struggling students. Curtin University is a current development partner, and Ex-Libris plan to be able to share more information on this progress in 2018. Ex-Libris have indicated that their future vision for 2018 to 19 includes developing Leganto to be a platform that can manage learning materials that academics create, for example, presentations, exams, essays, and other materials. They would allow academics to upload, share, and discover learning materials, to discuss and annotate these materials, and have usage analytics for these materials. They are also working on open educational resources expansion integrated with Primo Central, and plan to expose more rich media resources and low-cost alternatives in the recommendations. Next slide, please. So my key takeaways were Leganto focused and are: the library needs to consider what kind of service they are willing to provide. We should consider who will build the list, whether it's the library or the academic, and often it is a mixture of the two. There were very few institutions that have academics creating the whole reading lists, and some institutions have the library doing all of the creation and maintenance of the reading lists. It is also important to consider all working partners across campus. Don't just focus on the academics. Include support staff, deans, and student representatives in your planning. Technical implementation and campus engagement success are two different parts of the project. Throughout the conference, I heard many Leganto success stories, and here are the ideas that I've taken away. From UNSW, I learned that they are including Leganto in the Moodle template for courses that are currently being redesigned, that having local champions at senior levels contributes greatly to the success of the rollout, and it is important to ensure that your sample size is large enough when doing pilots to uncover the important potential issues. From Abate, I learned that training and encouragement from academic colleagues was contagious. No big stick approach was required, but there has been support from the university for 100% buy-in. From Bowen Balzano, they found that the project was a good way to embed the library as an active partner for supporting faculty. From Edinburgh, they realised that you need to target the influencers at your institution. There is no one way to communicate with all academics and students, and their key communicators were support librarians, school secretaries, learning technologists, and academic champions. The library there is tweeting about new lists and identifying interesting reading lists and promoting these through other channels. And the library is also tying the reading list into the subjects of international days. For example, today is the International Day for Tolerance, and it's also Social Enterprise Day. So what they will do is find out what day it is and then find lists that relate to these days and connect them and then promote them through their channels. And they are also promoting Leganto to the students and asking the students to encourage their conveners to use this service. So they're handing out pamphlets to the students rather than just targeting the academics. And from RMIT, they had the idea of creating a guidelines of good practice for creating a reading list. That was created by their Centre for Teaching rather than the library. Okay, Amelia.
Thank you, Kendall. A few of my takeaways, and obviously I think my list is actually much bigger than the 4 dot points that I've chosen to put on that slide. So I ended up just picking the things that I'm hoping to look at sometime soon. The first one is custom actions in Primo. So this was the winner of the Open Discovery Challenge, and they're created by, or the code for it is created by Nick Budak and is available on GitHub. And it's the ability to add a custom action to the Actions tab of a full record view. My hope is that we can use that for something like a report a bug functionality in order to encourage users to report when they find problems in records or problems accessing information on records. I found that the chatbot, which was presented by, and off the top of my head, I think it was a Singapore Management Library or Singapore Library of Management, I can't remember which way around that goes, at the Developers Day, and they presented a proof of concept for using a chatbot to answer at least basic user queries. It's something that I think is really fascinating. I don't know how well it would actually work. A lot of the queries that we get at RMIT are actually good quality sort of reference queries, and I don't know if a chatbot could answer those, but it's definitely an area that I'm keen to keep my eye on. Ferber and deduping. There was just one presentation on that, and I did a joint presentation actually with Laura Ackelman and Natalie Schultz on that, and both from working with them in the conversations we had in preparing the presentation and also the presentation and the questions that came afterwards, I learned a lot about what goes on in Primo's Ferber and its deduping, and also some things that I can do with the normalization rules to improve that. And I think Stacey is going to actually present a little bit on that soon, so I'm not going to talk any further about those. And the other real takeaway for me was ALMA resource sharing partners, another takeaway from the Developers Day, and what Macquarie has been doing at the moment with how they're planning on managing resource sharing partners instead of having to update them manually all the time. So I'm certainly hoping the whole community potentially can benefit from what Macquarie is currently working on there. Over to you, Stacey.
Okay, so overall, a good reason to go to these sorts of conferences is the community connections. So to actually meet and talk with the people that you only correspond with on the listserv, or ANZREG committee members, or employees of Ex Libris. And then I also took the opportunity to meet again with Evgenia, the head of support, which I did last year as well. And Neely Natan came along to that meeting as well. He's the new product manager for Discovery, which was great. And I was also pleased to be accepted as a member of the Primo product working group. So from a community connections perspective, it was a really valuable experience. Once I got home, I've been doing lots of report back to various groups at UQ with targeted things that are of interest to them. So for the liaison librarian teams, I've been speaking with them particularly about improvements to Primo. And we also have several committees which are focused on Primo and ALMA and analytics. They meet around the releases and updates, so giving them tidbits from the conferences. And also speaking to our collection management group, who had a particular interest in the database list, which has just come out or coming out in the November release. And through all of that, I've been trying to promote the overall theme of the conference as the content ideas exchange promotion. I think sometimes people can feel that they don't have much of a say, especially if they're not in the systems area like we are. And it's a way for them to influence change and tell ex-libris our priorities. Otherwise, I work closely with our information resource management team, and they're looking at taking charge of doing our submissions to the Content Ideas Exchange as a funnel for making sure we don't have duplication, and we get a good justification for those submissions, and then suggest to other groups that they might like to vote on those ideas. And also record keeping and success stories, say if we get one through to review or plan status, given it's a especially new ideas exchange, it'd be good to see some success stories coming through soon. And they're also interested in working on an internal group within their service to look at those various things that I've got listed there. We are very new to Alma and Primo, only going live last year. So we're still in an understanding and migration and then phase, and then broadening out to things like RDA and linked open data, and also recognising the great tool that we have in Alma Analytics, but at the same time remembering that it remembers everything. So making sure we keep that in mind. And also looking at things that ways we can improve the user experience through proactive link checking and troubleshooting. Now, what Amelia mentioned and my big takeaway, I also attended that further DDUP session, and I was particularly excited at the idea of merging some of our local data sources, which I went to IGeLU thinking wasn't possible. So we have Alma, of course, and we have our UQ eSpace institutional repository. And often we'll have a physical format of an item in Alma and then an electronic format in eSpace. So they're two records in Primo. That's a big deal to me because we only get 10 records per page in the new UI, and every record has to have value because I know from the stats that not many people click on next page. So what I've been experimenting with doing is taking, for example, one of our staff has a thesis that they wrote here at UQ, Eric Hornsby, who actually managed our implementation last year. And you can see the top one there is our production environment with the Alma record on top, and then number 2 is the eSpace record. And then below we've got the sandbox record where I've successfully merged them. And then this is just a slide showing the merged records, because if you look, obviously these slides have been made available, but if you look nice and closely, you'll see that the electronic record is preferred, which is not really ideal for us, as that's in Dublin core rather than mark. So I'll just flip back, and you can see, for example, that the merged record takes the subjects from the Dublin core over the Alma record subjects. And in this one, maybe that's not so bad, but we have other records that I'm interested in, like manuscript records, where obviously that would be a bigger deal. I've just got a bit of detail about what I did with that and my question mark as to whether that's a kludge or not. Because basically it was my proof of concept of if I could do this thing, because Dublin core doesn't have an out-of-the-box template for DDUP. So I took the concept of a particular field in DDUP, which basically says if this field matches to another record, it ignores all other DDUP rules. So all other things like title matching, author matching, place of publication, publisher, and it just says, right, I'm putting these two together. So whether that's a good thing or not is something that's still to be decided, but I think it would be quite difficult to come up with DDUP rules that would, for Dublin core, that would match to DDUP rules for mark in a successful way. So that's still a work in progress. A better option would really be to do it with Ferber. But Ferber is, as you can see, I broke the pipe in the sandbox. No, it just got upset at me. Because Ferber doesn't really have the same concept of just taking an identifier. It works more on title and author. So I'm going to have to play around with that a bit more. And for those of you who know the back office, this is the DDUP test utility. So you can just see how I successfully got that match on the C5 And then basically it goes, right, I've got 800 points at this quick match point, and then I'm ignoring all the rest. Whereas if it had gone through the usual dedup algorithm, it has to reach 875 points based on all of those other sorts of fields like the title and the author. So I'm really interested in knowing if anyone else is working on this type of thing as well, and working with you if you are. So I welcome you to contact me if you are. So that's just a really quick run through of that. Here are some presentation details for the conference in general. So all of the presentations are now up and available, including the slides from the Developers Day. So you're welcome to check those out. Any questions in our last few moments?
Okay, just a reminder, if you want to ask questions, you need to either unmute yourself or put something into chat. Okay, there's a question here from Skulk saying we submitted questions via the form but not heard back yet. What is the process on that?
Sorry, what form?
We submitted questions via the form but not heard back yet. What is the process on this?
I don't know what form they're talking about. You know?
Skulk?
Sorry, Helen, it might be the questions that are sent, the product-specific questions sent to
Okay.
the committee prior to the conference.
True, yes. I'm not sure when they're going to be made available. I know a lot of them were answered during product-specific sessions. It's probably something we need to follow up about. And yes, this session has been recorded, and hopefully we will get it up on the ANZREG website later this afternoon. Okay, are there any other questions? No? Oh, were there any questions around Rosetta and Alma integration?
I might sort of speak a little bit to that one. There wasn't a lot presented on Alma too much with regard to integration with Rosetta in the, I think it was the Rosetta product update. And they did share a few slides with workflows on it, on how one might go about integrating Rosetta and Alma. So obviously you've got the option of managing your data in Rosetta and just storing various versions in Alma, or using Alma for updating the metadata and then pushing those updates into Rosetta. So if you're probably interested in that integration between Rosetta and Alma, go through to the Ex Libris slides and from the IGeLU conference and pull out the ones from that Rosetta presentation.